Is this working? It is working. My name is Pia Altieri. You probably know who I am by now. I'm the adult faith formation and social justice ministries person. And it is my great pleasure to be here with you this morning on this glorious day, right? Some days it has to rain, and rain's a good thing. And so I'm here to introduce our friend Richard Hoffmann. He is going to speak to us about being a disciple in action, taking his faith and putting it to work. And in particular, his faith is Franciscan. So in the spirit of St. Francis, in the gifts that St. Francis has, St. Francis passes that on to others. And people like Richard and his friend Sally, whom Richard will be introducing you to shortly, they make promises to live their life in that pattern and to receive those graces. So I hope you enjoy Richard's and Sally's presentation. I know I will. And I hope you open your heart to the spirit of St. Francis on this glorious day. Thank you. Richard.
Well, good morning, good people. Peace and all good. For you that may not know me, I am Richard Hoffmann. I am a Roman Catholic and a member of the Holy Spirit Parish since I married Joanne Chase. In fact, I used to be introduced as Joanne's husband in 2013. And I am a secular Franciscan, one who follows in the footsteps of St. Francis and Clare of Assisi by means of a rule that was approved of by the church in 1978, and before that in 2021. Over the many years of my life, my faith, the way I look at God, people, creation, and death, and life and death, has evolved, and I contribute much of this especially to my being a secular Franciscan. My growth is lifelong. It really began to change when I heard Bishop Marno once say, "Images determine our attitudes, and attitudes determine our behaviors. What we think determines what we do." Father Dan Crosby once wrote, "Our very image of God determines the way we look at all of life, which then determines on how we live it, what we do." Jesus said in the Gospel of St. Matthew, "Be perfect even as your heavenly Father is perfect." So my image of God is to emulate the way our good God is, what our good God does. I am the seventh child of Matt and Anna Hoffmann, and grew up in a very traditional pre-Vatican II Catholic family in the 1940s and 50s. Although I didn't consciously have an image of God at that time, my image was really a combination of what my mother and dad were. A combination of both a nurturer and close as my mother was to me, and rather distant, and an enforcer as my father was. As a result, God for me became a combination of what my mother did, but he was also distant. My dad enforcing rules someplace way out there. When I went to the Catholic school in Appleton, Wisconsin, I was formally introduced to God, and I studied the Baltimore Catechism, and I learned all about sin and grace and how displeased God was with sin and how terrible it was. Though not consciously, my image of God became a man with a long white beard, sitting on a golden throne, way out there above the skies in his golden throne. And he knew everything about me, and he kept pen in hand, keeping track of all the good things I'd done, and especially all the bad things I had done. And I was going to be judged accordingly, and if I didn't come up to snuff at the end of my life, I was going to be condemned to hell. Quite frankly, I was afraid of God. I was afraid that God was going to condemn me to hell. So I tried to be good. Didn't think I was very good at it. I did go to confession, and I made sure I kept track of all those terrible sins I had committed and the exact numbers of them. And I remember one time going to that confession 2 or 3 times because I didn't have that number quite right, and I knew if I made a bad confession, I was going to go to hell. So I became very scrupulous and judgmental of both myself and unconsciously of others, categorizing myself as being good or bad, mostly bad, worthy or unworthy, in or out. In the 10th grade, I started to go to the seminary. During this time, I continued to have the similar views of God and others. Remember, this is pre-Vatican II. But when I entered St. Francis Major Seminary in Milwaukee, through studying philosophy and art, I became aware that there were other ways of looking at things, and what the importance of conscience was, that how it plays in our life, and I began to be more open of others and how their views of the world were not so different than mine, and I started to be not quite so judgmental. After I left the seminary, I became a teacher, and during one of the courses I took for continuing education, I became more aware of the importance of showing respect and giving choices. And once again, though I didn't consciously do this, my image of God was not a God that was not only so judgmental, but as one who respected me as I was and gave me choices and loved me even if the consequences resulted in my sinning. And I began to think the same and do the same for my students and for others. As I learned more about what it means to live as a secular Franciscan and met people like Father Dan Crosby, I developed my image of God, people, especially myself, and creation more consciously, and how my new image of God impacted everything that I did. I began to see God no longer as the Santa Claus God, as Joanne would say, one who keeps book on us with 2 columns, and I no longer had to fear God, but instead, my fear turned into wonder and awe. And by the way, this is the definition of the Greek for fear that is found in the Bible. Standing in awe and wonder before God. So now fear no longer became a servile fear, one of being punished, but a filial fear. A fear of losing or diminishing a relationship with one who unconditionally loved me no matter what I did. This God became a good God, or as St. Francis would say, all good, supreme good, totally good, you who alone are good. This God consciously became the loving parent in the parable of the prodigal son, one who sits on his porch looking for me, the wayward child, to return. And when I do, this good God doesn't just sit waiting for me. He runs at full speed wrapping his warm, merciful arms around me. I also began to see people more like God sees us. Even good, but also very good, as Genesis 1 says. And I began to see people who want to conform their thoughts and deeds to those of Christ. By means of that radical interior change, God calls conversion, but not through fear of going to hell, but love of the one who unconditionally loved us first, not wanting to disappoint or weaken or even lose that relationship. And I began to see creation as relationships, as my brothers, as brother sun, sister moon, brother wind and air, sister water. Sounds familiar? And my daughter's dog as Sister Lily. I began to look upon life, and especially conflict, a little more holistically, seeing a possible solution that includes both and, not just either or. I began to see Mother Earth giving us a world of plenty, enough for everyone, if everyone would share, so that if another pandemic came along, I wouldn't have to hoard all that toilet paper. I began to see God indeed as the God of justice. He is a God of justice, but not punitive justice, but restorative justice. Not coming to earth, as Jesus said, to condemn the world and us, but to make the world whole. Just like that man in Wausau, whose car was stolen by a 16-year-old girl, taken for a joyride, and after a long police chase, totaled the car. And the police brought the girl to the man, and asked if he wanted to prosecute her. He said no. If she went to juvenile prison, she would come out worse. Instead, what he did, he paid her tuition to a Catholic high school until she graduated. And she did. I began to see this beautiful kingdom of God, or as Matthew would say, kingdom of heaven, right here on earth. And I began to spend more time in helping to bring about that kingdom right here and now in the minuscule ways that I do, rather than just focusing on whether I'm going to get to the kingdom of God in the next life. Now I just leave that up to God. A while ago, Father Steve asked me after Mass and shared with me that the Franciscans believe that God would have come into the world just as Jesus did, even if there was no sin. Even if Adam and Eve had not sinned in Genesis 3. And that is what we as Franciscans believe. So why do we believe that God came into the world? We would say for one reason, and one reason only, out of pure love. God was not dependent upon Adam and Eve sinning, but from the beginning of time, God chose to come into the world. As John in chapter 1 of his gospel says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh. And one of the reasons why I've come to see God, people, creation, and myself, and all the world the way I do, is based on the ramifications of this love and belief. I am a secular Franciscan. I've come to believe that all people, like me, I come to believe that I, like all people, are beloved children of God, made in the image of God and the likeness of Christ. Good people who definitely are in need of conversion, or as we as Franciscans say, daily conversion. I know this parish have very similar ways of looking at God, people, creation, and the world, and I really believe this is a Franciscan parish. But by becoming a secular Franciscan, I found a place to receive support in living out this Franciscan spirit in an open and non-judgmental way, not only at our gatherings once a month, but every day. So what is a secular Franciscan? First of all, what we are not. We are not a club. We are a way of life, one that strives to emulate what God does, what God's Son did when he walked on earth. Neither are we a prayer group, although I'm telling you, prayer and contemplation are the soul of all we are and do. We strive to make Christ the center and inspiration of our lives with God and people. We look for ways to follow the poor and crucified Christ by getting rid of the baggage, developing together as a fraternity, or as I like to say, a family, a spirited detachment from temporal goods by simplifying our own material needs. We look for ways to promote justice by the testimony of our lives and our courageous initiatives. And like the book we read as a parish not so long ago, Divine Renovation, in chapter 2, we look for ways to rebuild the church by energetically devoting ourselves to living in full communion with the Pope, bishops, and priests, by fostering an open and trusting dialogue of apostolic effectiveness and creativity. And we pledge ourselves to follow Christ by emulating Christ, by going from gospel to life and life to gospel, by means of our rule that was approved of by the Church in 1978 by Pope Paul VI. We at St. Peter's Fraternity would like to invite you good people to one of our gatherings. We meet the third Tuesday of every month, in fact, this next Tuesday, at Franciscan Downtown, beginning at 6 o'clock. Come and see what it means to Come and see just what it means to live out the Franciscan spirit that this parish definitely has as part of a secular Franciscan family. Now, Sally is going to come up, and she's going to relate a little bit more about how she became, and maybe even tell us a story about one of the stories about Francis. Sally, this is Sally Crane. She's a member of St. Peter's Fraternity, and right now our vice minister, who is also in charge of JPIC.
I'm going to start with a story. Oh, can you hear? Ooh, okay. I'm going to start with a story. Not so long ago, and not very far away, there lived a very spiritual dairy farmer and his wife. They had 8 children. These 8 children, they learned the importance of taking good care of God's creation. They learned about crops, how to care for them, how to grow them. They learned about animals. They went to the Catholic school, and where they learned more, never missed a Sunday Mass, and we grew together. It was this environment that St. Francis of Assisi was introduced. This farmer's children continued to grow, and many started families of their own, and one of them was me. I'm Sally. and I went to a private Catholic college. I also went to many retreats, one being Teens Encounter Christ, and that's where I met my husband, Bob. And this part is kind of a tricky part. He was actually contemplating joining the Franciscan monastery. And so we'll jump over the tricky part, fast forward a couple of decades, and we have 3 nearly grown children. And one of them became very interested in Franciscans, and so he went to St. Lawrence Seminary High School in Fond du Lac, or near Fond du Lac. And while he was there, he left us at age 14, and for a mom, that's very difficult. So we tried and thought of many different ways to connect with him. And one of them was researching secular Franciscans, and we found out there was one here in town. And we were very excited about that. So my son joined us, my husband and myself, and we all joined St. Peter's Fraternity and have been active in it for the last 12 years. Some of the things that drew me to further investigate and to eventually become Franciscans were the attributes of St. Francis of Assisi and his followers: humility, prayerfulness, reverence for the dignity of others, all others, service, hope, living the gospel, poverty, and spirituality. Which brings me to my favorite story about St. Francis. And as I tell you this, I want you to think, I'm sure it's a story you've heard, but I want you to think about, where do you find or hear the humility, the prayerfulness, reverence of the dignity of others, the service, the hope, living the gospel, the poverty, and the spirituality in this story? So it was in a town, not a very big town, where people were very afraid of nighttime. Because it was at nighttime that this terrible, terrible wolf would come. And he would take anything he could get. He would even grab their animals from their farms, around their houses, their barns, everything, anything he could get. The people were incredibly frightened. And St. Francis heard about this. And he knew he had to do something. So he decided to make a trip over to Gubbio and talk to that wolf. Brother Wolf, why are you so angry? Why are you so terrible to everyone? And the wolf said, I'm not angry. I'm looking for friends. I'm just hungry. Very hungry. So St. Francis went to the people and he said, I think we can take care of this as a community. If you agree to feed the wolf, he will agree to be your friend. And that's my story. And that's what happened. The wolf became the friend of the town people of Gubbio. Now, I'm an elementary school teacher, and this is one thing I do. I create little things to remind you of what we just talked about. Something you can take home. And this one you have to say is sweet, because it has a Hershey bar. So Hershey, what was I talking about? What does Hershey stand for? Anyone? Humility. Humility, putting others first. Encourage a prayerful community. R stands for reverence of the dignity of each person. S is the service to all, especially to the poor and marginalized. H, hope, always looking for the positive. E, to evangelize by living the gospel. Y, yearning for poverty. And S, spirituality being a love for God, creation, and service. So I'd like everyone to take one of these as you go. It does tell us that the fraternity meets every third Tuesday at Franciscan's downtown, but I forgot to put the time, and Richard said it was 6 o'clock, so we meet in the evening, 6 o'clock. And hopefully everyone can, at one point, join us. Drop the mic. The end.
Now you guys will never see a Hershey bar the same way. So I'm wondering, do you have any questions for our guests? This is my Phil Donahue moment.
What service is the community doing?
The role of service. We think of others first. We let go of our ego. We see something, and we are required to do something. That's what our secular Franciscan rule says. We can't just sit by and watch it. We have to do something, whatever we're able to do. I have attempted to do that minuscule service perhaps by being a Stephen minister, by volunteering at Franciscan Downtown, by helping out in church whenever I can. I now live in Marshfield, and as a result, I can't commit myself into getting here because of weather and stuff. So if somebody needs, Father has stopped me every once in a while that I could be a lector, otherwise a community distributor. I've done ushering here in church itself. I'm now working with the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd. I've gone to one class, 48 hours it was, and now I can do the 3-year-olds. And then next one will be next year I'll be able to do 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. But right now I'm just helping Maureen. I'm assisting her right now and learning from a fantastic teacher. Actually, not a teacher, but a presenter. Service is absolutely necessary. We have to do something. We have to be part of and that's one of the reasons why I'm in this parish, because this parish is so justice-minded. We are doing something. Yeah.
Every year we have 4 apostolates that we do as a fraternity, and we quarter it off. So we're just starting. We just talked about it yesterday. We're going to be starting for St. Anthony's, a retreat center. So we're going to be donating to their like a retreat fund there if anybody needs help. So that's one of the things we do. We kind of break our year up in quarters. And then in the spring, we do Pregnancy Resource Center, the one downtown here. And we've had baby showers and get donations and gifts that we donate to them. We also, of course, take donations and volunteer and do things at Franciscan's downtown. And then the other one is the Well Project that I think came from this parish, yeah, the Haiti one. So we kind of have that as our apostolates, and then we talk about it and we may change them from time to time.
And our Haiti project, we're able to get almost $400 we're able to get this year for this project. Any other questions?
What has to be done or what should be done if somebody wants to actually join? Are there steps and processes for that?
Basically, the first step is come and see. It's not a club, and as a result, to become a secular Franciscan, it's about a 3-year process. I don't like looking at it that way because once I began, I was part of the secular Franciscan Order. I felt I was. I just was not professed. I started living that way. First step is about 3 months of just coming and seeing what we are. Then there's a 9 months of what we call a beginning part, in which we introduce what it is that necessary for becoming a secular Franciscan. You must be Catholic. You must be in full communion with the church. You have to be confirmed, and if you're not, then we end up arranging it so that it can be possible. After that, there is about 20 some months of learning about the Franciscan rule and what it means to be formed, informed, formed, and transformed. The biggest thing that I look for as a secular, when I do the formation, is that a person is open and willing to be transformed, willing and open to new ideas. You may not agree with everything that we have, that we say, and that is okay. But we don't want people to say, it's just my way. I mean, there's 2 different ways of looking at it. In other words, it's a both and, not just either or. Not that we're judgmental. So I think that those are the main ways. So the first step would be just come and see what we are, and then tell us that you'd like to continue, and then we would just have formation at that time.
Thanks, Richard, Sally. I've been interested in the interaction of secular Franciscans with the Franciscan Order. Are you at the table when they have meetings? And I was just curious about the relationship.
We are connected to the 4 Franciscan families. There's the Franciscan Minors, and that would be like Father Placidus. The Franciscan Capuchins, that would be like Father Dan Crosby is Marathon City. The Conventuals, and I'm not sure who those, anybody in the area that is that. And then there's, I'm sorry? Yeah, Bishop Callahan, yeah. And then there's also the, actually, they're called Third Order ones, and they are, let's see, Franciscan Third Order? I'm not sure what they're called. But anyway, yeah, so we are bonded, our fraternity is bonded to the minors. So our headquarters was in Franklin, Wisconsin, but now is in Atlanta. St. Anthony's is bonded to Detroit. That's one that they're bonded to. So as we all have what's called a spiritual assistant. And the spiritual assistant is the go-between between the fraternity, the local fraternity, and then the regional, the head fraternity that would be in Atlanta. Okay? Yes. It's a good question. Anybody else?
I don't know if I can explain myself, but when you talk about Brother Moon and sisters and trees, whatever, when you're out for a walk, how are you different than I'm going out for a walk?
I'm happy you asked that question. That is something that definitely impacts me. When I go out for a walk, I take a look at the sun, and this becomes brother sun for me. And I thank God for the light, the gift of light that God gives us. In the Canticle of Creatures, we say that the sun is like the image of what God is, radiant, all shining. I look at even the stone on the side of the road as bearing the imprint of God. I definitely look at the creation, the trees, thinking of how the trees show the grandeur of God and show the beauty of God and how amazing those trees are. They take our refuge, our carbon dioxide, and turn it into oxygen. And I look at the sky, and I look at the clouds, and I think how close God is to us and how he overshadows us. So it definitely makes a difference in my life. When I go and walk, I always thank God for these things. Anybody else? Well, yes. Oh, definitely. Definitely. We accept anyone who is Catholic. To be professed, you have to be 21. Okay. But, and you have to be in full communion with the church. But yeah, definitely women are accepted. Anybody else? Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming.